Okay, I want to start us off with a kind of experiment. I want you to picture a line, a really weird, jagged, uncomfortable line. It connects two things that on the surface have absolutely nothing to do with each other. On one end, you have a grade 6 English textbook, just a standard school book. And on the other end, a national crisis about the safety and dignity of a prime minister.
It sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? Or maybe one of those conspiracy boards with all the red string connecting random photos. But, this isn't a theory. It's a very real, very public situation that's unfolding right now in Sri Lanka.
It is. And I have to admit, when I first saw the source material for this deep dive, I had to read the opening paragraph a few times. We're talking about a statement that just came out today, January 18th, 2026, from the Women in Media Collective, the WMC. And they're responding to something that started so small a bureaucratic typo, but just exploded.
Exploded is definitely the right word. We aren't just talking about, a political scandal or some heated debate on education policy. The WMC is flagging this as a flashpoint for what they're actually calling political violence.
And that phrase, that's what stopped me. Political violence. Because usually when you and I hear that, we think of riots or coups.
Physical altercations.
Exactly. But the WMC is applying that label to a campaign of targeted abuse against Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarsurya.
And that's really the core mission of our deep dive today. We need to unpack why they're using that exact terminology. We need to figure out the difference between legitimate dissent, saying, hey, the government messed up, and this darker thing the WMC is pointing to. We're working from a report by LNW, Lanka Newsweb, that details this declaration. And it's important to say right up front, this is not a fringe opinion. This statement has been endorsed by almost 200 people and dozens of civil society organizations.
So let's go back to the beginning of that jagged line I mentioned, the inciting incident. It feels almost ridiculous to say it, but this whole thing started with a website address.
It did. According to the report, there was a minor error in a grade 6 English textbook. A website address was printed incorrectly. Now, in any other context, this is an administrative hiccup. You issue a correction, maybe you put a sticker over it, you reprimand the proofreader, and everyone moves on.
Right. I mean, I've seen typos in government documents before. The usual reaction is an eye roll, maybe some grumbling about competence, taxpayer money at work, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And if the reaction had stayed there, we wouldn't be doing this deep dive. If people were just writing op-eds about, say, the decline of editorial standards in the Ministry of Education, that would be valid. That's governance criticism. But the WMC points out that their reaction completely bypassed the ministry. It bypassed the proofreaders. It zeroed in almost immediately on the Prime Minister herself.
Which just feels like a massive leap. Why is the Prime Minister personally responsible for a typo in a 6th grade book?
Logically, she isn't. But politically, and I think symbolically, she became the lightning rod. The report describes how this tiny error just spiraled into a public controversy. But the nature of that controversy wasn't about education. The WMC calls it a concerted effort to demean the Prime Minister, using misogynistic language and personal smears.
Okay, hold on. I want to pause on concerted effort, that phrase. That suggests this wasn't just random people on social media getting angry. It implies coordination.
That's the implication, yes. When you see a wave of abuse that hits the same very specific notes, in this case, sexist and sexually charged attacks, it often suggests the initial error was just an excuse. It was a pretext to launch something that was already there, waiting. The WMC is basically arguing this wasn't about the textbook at all. The textbook was just the trigger for a campaign of sexualized insults and personal vilification.
And this brings us to the really big idea in this report. The WMC calls this political violence. I want to push back a little here just to be the devil's advocate. We live in the internet age. People are mean. Politicians get roasted online every single day. Is calling it violence, isn't that maybe diluting the meaning of the word? Or are they trying to do something specific with that term?
That is the crucial question. And you're right. In common language, violence usually means a fist or a weapon. But in the world of human rights and political science, the definition is broader. The WMC is drawing a line based on two things: intent and impact.
Break that down for us.
Okay, so legitimate dissent, even really harsh criticism. It targets a person's actions or their policies. It's part of the deal in a democracy. I don't like this law, or this department is failing. That's protected speech. But the WMC says that when you target a leader with sexualized vitriol, you're not debating anymore. You're trying to degrade their humanity. You're trying to strip them of their legitimacy, not because of what they did, but because of who they are.
So the goal isn't to win an argument. The goal is to drive them out of the public space.
Precisely. And that's where the violence label comes from. It's psychological violence, it's structural violence, it's designed to intimidate. And by classifying it as political violence, the WMC is also making a kind of legal argument. They're saying this isn't just free speech. This is a violation of safety and rights that the state has a duty to stop.
That makes sense. It reframes it from hurt feelings to an actual human rights violation. But let's get to the gender part of this, because I can hear some people thinking, well, male politicians get called names too. Crooks, liars, idiots. Is it really that different for Dr. Marzuria?
Yeah, and that's a fair question, and the WMC anticipates it. They state very clearly that while men absolutely face criticism, even abuse, there's a fundamental difference in the kind of hostility women face.
And what is that difference specifically?
It's the sexualization. When a male politician messes up, he's almost never attacked with sexually charged slurs. His gender isn't the weapon used against him. He might be called incompetent, sure, but he isn't usually told he belongs in the kitchen or subjected to these graphic sexual insults. The WMC report notes that women politicians are routinely subjected to scrutiny and hostility that their men counterparts rarely face.
So it's about the attack vectors. For a man, it's his job performance. For a woman, it's her womanhood.
Right. And the source links this to deeply rooted gender prejudice in political culture. It's this double standard where a woman in a position of power is still seen as an interloper, someone who stepped out of her place. So when a mistake happens, like this textbook typo, it's sees on as proof that she doesn't belong there. It confirms the bias.
It's like a, see, we told you she couldn't handle it kind of vibe.
Exactly that. And that's why the reaction is so disproportionate. It's not about the typo. It's about punishing the woman for being in that high seat in the first place.
This leads to something I really want to get into because I think it's maybe the scariest part of this whole report, the enablers. Because a mod like this doesn't just appear. Who is letting this happen, or who is helping it happen?
This is a huge part of the WMC's declaration. They are not just blaming anonymous trolls. They're pointing the finger directly at the institutions that are supposed to be the guardrails for society. They name two main culprits: the regulatory mechanisms and, critically, sections of the media.
Let's start with the media, because the media would normally say, hey, we're just reporting the news, there's a controversy, we're covering it. What does the WMC say they're doing wrong?
The WMC accuses certain political figures and parts of the media of allowing these harmful narratives to just circulate freely. But I think it goes deeper than just passive reporting. There's a concept in media ethics called amplification.
Yeah.
If a hate group starts some misogynistic hashtag and a major news outlet runs a headline like Prime Minister targeted by X hashtag and then repeats all the insults in the article, well, they're basically doing the trolls' work for them.
They're giving the abuse a megaphone it wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yes. They legitimize it. They treat it as a valid topic of discourse instead of calling it what it is, harassment. The WMC is suggesting that parts of the media in Sri Lanka are complicit. They're not filtering out the hate speech. They're monetizing the outrage.
And what about the regulators? Don't they have laws against harassment? Cybercrime laws? Where are they?
That's the other side of it. The WMC argues that these regulatory mechanisms have failed to curb inflammatory rhetoric. It's a failure of enforcement. You can have all laws you want on the books, but if the police or the digital regulators just shrug when a woman is being torn apart online, then the law doesn't really exist.
It creates a culture of impunity, like, go ahead, say whatever you want, nothing's going to happen to you.
And that impunity is what normalizes the abuse. If the regulatory bodies don't act, the public starts to think this is just acceptable. It shifts the window of what's considered normal political debate.
Which brings us to the so what for the average person. I mean, Dr. Marzuria is the prime minister. She's tough. She can probably handle some mean comments. Why should the average citizen in Colombo or Kandy care about this? Why does this matter for democracy?
Well, the WMC makes a very strong case that this corrodes public discourse. Think of it like rust eating away at a bridge. If the political environment is toxic, if it's just flooded with hate speech and these sexualized attacks, you can't have a real conversation about policy. The noise just drowns out the signal.
So we stop talking about how to fix the schools because we're too busy talking about the insults being thrown at the PM.
Correct. But there's a longer-term effect, too. It weakens democratic norms because it creates this huge barrier to entry for women. I mean, imagine you're a young woman in Sri Lanka. You're smart, passionate, you want to serve your community, and then you look at what's happening to the prime minister over the textbook typo. You see the vitriol. You see the lack of consequences. What's your reaction going to be?
My reaction is, no thank you. I am not signing up for that.
Exactly. And that is the tragedy here. It discourages an entire generation of future leaders. It tells 50% of the population that the public square is fundamentally unsafe for them. The WMC warns that this environment makes it unsafe for women in public life. It culls the nation's talent pool.
They also mention the rule of law in the report. How does this connect to that idea?
Well, the rule of law is built on equality, right? Everyone is treated the same under the law. But if there's a special category of abuse that's allowed against women, if there's a loophole where you can harass a female leader and just get away with it, then the law isn't equal. The WMC is saying that gender-based political abuse erodes the very foundation of the rule of law itself.
Okay, so the diagnosis is pretty grim. A toxic culture, failed regulators, a double standard threatening democracy. What's the prescription? What does the WMC actually want the government to do?
They're very specific. They don't just want an apology or a statement. They want concrete steps. And the first one is the big one, accountability. They are calling on the government to prevent, investigate, and prosecute all forms of political violence against women.
Prosecute is a heavy word. They want people in court over this.
They do, and they specify whether carried out online or in person.
Yeah.
They are explicitly closing that, oh, it's just the internet loophole. They are saying digital violence is real violence, and it demands real legal consequences.
That would be a massive shift in how we handle online behavior.
It would. And their second demand is for active support. They want the state to actively support women's leadership at every level. It's a call for affirmative protection. The government needs to be proactive, not just reactive.
Now, civil society groups often back these demands up with some kind of international leverage. Did they cite any treaties here?
They did. They pulled out the big guns. They reminded the Sri Lankan government of its international commitments, specifically citing CEDAW and the ICCPR.
We hear those acronyms thrown around, but let's make them real for a second. What is CEDAW, really?
Think of CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as a binding contract. Sri Lanka signed this contract with the world. It basically says, we promise to eliminate discrimination against women in all areas of life, and that includes politics.
So by citing it, the WMC is saying, you are in breach of contract.
Exactly. They are saying, you promised the world you would fix this and you're not doing it. And then there's the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This covers the right to participate in public affairs without discrimination. The WMC is arguing that if the state allows this level of abuse, it is effectively blocking women from exercising their civil rights.
It's a smart strategy. It takes this local political firestorm and elevates it to a matter of international law. It puts a whole different kind of pressure on the government.
It does. It signals that the world is watching, or at least that the mechanisms are in place for the world to watch.
As we wrap this up, I just keep going back to that image of the textbook. Such a small thing. A typo. And yet it revealed so much about the fragility of the political culture.
That's really the key takeaway, isn't it? The typo was a stress test, and the system failed that test spectacularly. The typo showed that the misogyny was just simmering right below the surface, waiting for any excuse to erupt.
And the WMC's argument is that we can't just let it erupt. We have to cap it. We have to start treating it as the violence that it is.
Because if we don't, we are basically accepting a version of democracy where women are guests, not citizens. And that isn't a democracy at all.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. We've been talking about the prime minister, the head of government, theoretically the most powerful person in the room. If a minor administrative error can trigger a wave of abuse that threatens her safety and dignity, what chance does a woman running for a local council have? What chance does a student activist have? If the fortress isn't safe, what happens to everyone out in the open field?
That is the question that needs an answer. And that answer has to come from the government, the media, and frankly, from all of us.
A lot to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Stay curious.